Our society seems to value rational thought over creative, immeasurable experience. And I think there's a better balance to be had. Well, for every individual, before we start fixing society. Clean your room.
Okay. And we are live.
Wake up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy. I grab my glasses out the door, I'm gonna hit this city. Before I leave, brush my teeth with a bottle of Jack. Cause when I leave for the night, I ain't coming back. I'm talking pedicure on my toes.
What else are you talking about?
By Kesha. That's my tedious link to clouds and clocks.
Where was
That's what you wanted to talk about, James?
That's today's topic.
The chorus was TikTok.
Ah.
TikTok on the
There you go.
No. Oh.
But that's a perfect segue into Karl Popper. So from 1K to another, from Kesha to Karl Popper. So this idea. Here we
like
go.
What you did there.
You see this going? From so Karl Popper. I heard this on a TED talk by Rory Sutherland, that I shared with you both.
Mm-hmm.
Karl Popper was an Austrian philosopher in the mid-20th century, and his idea, which we're going to discuss a little bit, was that everything in the world sits on a spectrum between clouds and clocks. Okay, so clouds are the things which are more creative, more immeasurable, more psychological in a lot of ways, and then clocks are the more rational, regular things that you can be more certain of. And the idea in this TED talk, and something which I've been thinking about every day for a month at least, is that often we treat the world as if it was full of clocks, as if it was a purely rational exercise to exist. Whereas by doing that, we ignore all of the potential that there is in understanding and utilizing everything under what would be termed the clouds. So everything which is intangible, which is based on more feelings, more emotions, more human experience that can't necessarily be measured. So that's it.
Interesting. So,
what are we going to do for 16 minutes now?
All right, well, I'll keep going until you stop me. So,
all right, go on.
There's this clip, for example, one example would be, there's this clip in Dead Poet Society, the film with Robin Williams, right? Mm-hmm. And he's teaching this English literature class, and they're talking about poetry, and he gets one kid to read out of this book, and this book by J. Evans Pritchard is basically taking poetry and saying that it's 100% clock-like, so that you can measure how good a poem is by, what does he say? He talks about you have to rate its perfection and its performance on a graph, and then you can work out how great the poem is. So poetry is 100% clocks. Whereas Robin Williams' character, the teacher, says, he says, excrement. That's what I think of J. Evans Pritchard. We're not laying pipe, we're talking about poetry. And so his idea is that it's about how it makes you feel. And you can't put that on a graph, and you can't set an expectation for that. It's about the experience with this piece of art in this case. And, well, me personally, I have the tendency to treat too many things as clocks, where I think I would get a lot more out of the experience if I at least considered the cloud aspect. So maybe my world exists above the neck, whereas there's so many sensations and so much information that you can get from your own body. You know, like there's 100 million neurons in the stomach. If you actually learn to listen to it, it can give you a lot of information about how you feel about a certain situation. Or in the solar perplex, right? This massive bundle of nerves here in the middle of the chest, which is not your heart. When people say, oh, I feel it here, they're probably talking about the solar perplex, not the heart. Plexus, sorry, the solar plexus. So just tapping into all that information that's available to you, and and then you can decide if it's going to be a rational decision or an irrational one. And irrational, that's not a criticism, that's irrational as in it's going to be more of a clouds decision, something that you feel is right. Beautiful irrationality.
We got a question.
Please.
No, I just have things to add. I was only joking about how we're going to fill 16 minutes. I found it really interesting when you sent me the TED talk. But well, I mean, that's good, very self-aware of you, James.
Thanks.
A couple of things come to mind when you talk about it. A nice example that I don't know too well, so I'm going to go out on a limb and let it come out of my mouth. But have you seen the film Rush about Niki Lauda and James? Is it James Hunt, the F1 driver?
I haven't seen it yet.
No, neither did I.
Oh, mate, it's brilliant. And I never understood the kind of need for speed thing that people have until I watched that. It did make me think, they talk about the closer you are to death, the more alive you feel and all that sort of thing. It puts it well. But anyway, it seems to me like they're a good example of clocks and clouds because Lauda was they were great rivals, yeah, and they kind of during their time. But it seems like Lauda was a real, Niki Lauda was a real clocks guy because he was all about the numbers and getting everything right. And it seems like James, I think it's
James Hunt.
It was James Hunt, yeah. Was a real clouds guy, really just ran off spirit, and he was a bit of a party guy, and he'd sort of just turn up and he had that ability to kind of not just lock into the moment fully. Yeah. And you see it a lot in sport. I always remember people saying about John Jones just he's the kind of same party guy, doesn't seem to be too clinical in his approach to anything, but turns up in the ring and just manages to really go into the matrix and pull it out of the bag. And what's you were saying, James, about you being more of a clocks person. Do you think it's harder for a clock person to cloud than it is for a cloud person to be more clock? It's hard to learn the cloud, isn't it?
But the
cloud element.
Being logical and rational is not that easy. If you're not used to living like that, without giving away personal conversations recently, the way that you see the world is the way that you see the world. And sometimes I make the mistake of thinking, well, everybody has to see it from this perspective, right? Because this is literally logical. This is logical. I don't know. I don't think it's easy to try and see from two directions at once, whether you're coming from clouds or clocks. I think, but if you want to have a more complete view, you need to learn that everything is clouds and clocks. It's not one or the other.
So, James, I have a question for you.
Oh.
Do you think that because you obviously are looking onto the topic through your own lens, your own experience, but do you think that people around you or generally in the world are more clock people or are more cloud people?
Well, Dan, can I talk about you?
Absolutely.
So Den, for example, is a very dear friend of mine, and I'd say that Den's, let's just take marathon running as one thing that we do together. Den's perspective is, in the past, has been much more cloud-like, like training without a watch, going on feeling, and this works perfectly for Den. He's got some like personal bests of about 2:44. It works for him. Whereas in the past, for races that we've done, I've been too much in the clocks camp, right? So I tried to learn a bit from Den and say, actually, you do need to feel, you do need to enjoy it. You do need to be there in the moment. So I've tried to combine the two. And actually in Berlin last weekend, I had a great time and I felt a lot of things and I was present more emotionally in the cloud sense. And I also kept an eye on the clock, literally on the clock in the clock sense. So I think you can learn from people around you. So the question was, are people in my life more cloudy or clocky? I think I've got a huge range. I haven't got my circle of close friends is not a large one, but even the handful of people that I'm thinking of now, there's a very good range of clouds and clocks. I think there's something to be said for both. I don't think it affects it. I mean, it is slightly, it can be related to personality types in some situations, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Sam? Are you more a cloudy or a clocky, or does it depend on what you're doing?
Well, I'm thinking about it also. I'm also thinking what this concept really means and how it applies to real life, because the way we discuss it now, and I'm not sure if that's the original meaning of clocks and clouds. The concept, it's about decision making and the way you make decisions in life. Right?
It's the way that you experience things.
Or experience, okay.
So.
And I think there's aspects.
I suppose your priority. So is your priority the numbers of what you're doing? Or if I'm teaching a lesson, say, is the priority the exact, following the exact protocol with the exact timings that I've got on my plan? Or if you're a musician, so is it about playing correctly in terms of the exact beat? That would be clocks. Or clouds, is it more about experimentation, sort of being a bit more free with the ideas, a bit more just feeling the room a little bit more and adapting?
Yeah, you see, it's very difficult because I have a feeling there's a big mix in my own life, depending on which domain we're talking about. So, of course, IT is very clocky by the nature of the topic. So when I have to do with technology, obviously there's a lot of clocks involved. But when we talk about music, obviously there's also rules and everything, but it depends also on the musical project that I'm working on. So some are very organic, and there's a lot of improvisation, and there's not really any time even to think about these rules. Some obviously were learned, but most of it is feeling, really. Same when I go, running or hiking, whatever. I mean, there's a mix. When I prepare for a run now, and thanks to you guys, I got introduced to the topic of marathons. Thank you very much. Now I'm an addict because of you. So I start now looking at times and try to have some point of reference to improve upon. So if you need the numbers to improve. And there's other realms. We talked about it in past podcasts when it comes about optimizing budgets, for example. Like I might do price lists of when I go shopping and check where I spend less sometimes, and try to. There's a lot of numbers involved. So that's very clocky. But then there's a lot of aspects. Hiking, for example. I mean, I plan maybe the hike until the moment when I start. But once I start, I'm not checking the watch the whole time. Then I'm just experiencing it. So I think there's both possible. I think though in the world or generally, and it's just my point of view, my opinion. So I have no numbers here, no facts, no clocks. But I think most people tend to be in clouds though. Most people are dreaming and thinking about things are irrational. If you think about religion, if you think about conspiratorial theories, if you think about people who care about feelings and less about facts, as said by a very famous missionary from the right spectrum of the political aisle.
Shapiro, who you referencing?
Exactly. He says facts don't care about your feelings. So it's a reference to people who go by feelings and less by facts. I mean, of course, that's just a slogan, but it's true. There's a lot of people who are very irrational. So I think most people are really living in clouds, and there's not so many rational people around.
Okay, so in terms of a worldview, in terms of what do I think about transgender people in sport, okay, I am happy to be 99% clocks on that, okay? I want to look at the data. I want to look. Don't raise your eyebrow like that at me, so we'll go into this.
That happens subconsciously.
I just hit your trigger. So if we're talking about transgender sports or something along those lines, I'm 99% clocks. So I want to look at the data and I want to look at the facts and I want to make a decision based on the facts. I don't care about your feelings because you were born a woman and now you were born as a biological male and now you want to compete in women's MMA, right? And you want to smash biological women in it. I don't care if you feel bad that you can't do that, okay? So I'm 99% clocks there. When it comes to forming worldviews like that, I'm happy to go with the data. Mm-hmm. When I'm talking about experiences, however, like my own personal experiences of how I just walk around Rome on a Saturday morning, right? Mm-hmm. Then I think I would like to be much more towards the clouds in terms of if I'm not in a rush, then just sort of go with the flow. If I see something that I like, then enjoy that and try to experience it more holistically and not just logically in terms of numbers and data. So you don't have to be a clocks person or a clouds person. I think there's a place for all of them, but
exactly.
And everyone's a percentage of each, aren't they? No one's going to be 100% clouds or 100% clocks.
No, not at all. But I think the interesting thing for me about this idea then is that I started to notice places where I was so far into the clocks that I stopped feeling anything.
Like what?
You must think I trust you asking questions like that. Like what? Well, let's say running, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the danger for me is getting so lost in the data, the numbers, the minutes per kilometer, my heart rate, steps per minute. Like this Garmin gives you bloody page of data every time you run. That sometimes the danger would be so focused on all of these details, looking at my watch all the time, that I didn't look up and see that the sun was rising and it was reflecting off the river. And the bridge, for example, in Rome, it does a reflection and it looks like it makes a hole, holes in the, like all these little things, or the colors of the leaves on the trees. And it might sound corny, but these little things give you a lot of enjoyment in life if you know where to look, if you remind yourself to look. So it's just finding a balance in certain things.
So would you say that you would like to be more of a cloud person, that you kind of feel that there's something that you want to work towards, that there's something missing maybe, or that you're like, it sounds almost like you're sad about the fact that you are by default very clocky, or like there's something missing, or like an effect,
I wouldn't say I'm sad. Yeah, I would say that I want to move into clouds a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I could you won't believe this, but I could rationalize a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I could rationalize a wedding that I went to. Right? I could, before the wedding, I could give you a list of reasons why it's a waste of time. Right? And they were all clock reasons, economics, data on how many people get divorced. Clock.
Fast forward, and there's a video of James in the party. I saw the video with
the parties and
all kind of funny stuff.
The ceremony made me feel a lot of things that I started to actually observe in myself that can easily override all of those rational reasons against, And I think maybe going forward, I'd like to just be more comfortable observing what I'm experiencing below the neck and not just rely on these 6 inches.
Mm-hmm. How would you go about that though? Like what do you personally use as tools, let's say, to move from one spectrum, from the clocks to the clouds?
Do you know, I think there's tons of information below your neck, like I said before, and the problem is that we don't even observe it.
I know I've got a good.
Go on then.
Maybe it's that you have to give your cloud more allocation than you give it before. Maybe you're basing you're giving it 10% based how you feel is 10% of your decision, and you're basing the other 90 on facts. Whereas really you need to give it more 50. But it's hard to do that because you can't explain the 50% feeling. You can't account. You see what I mean? You can't account for that. You need to obviously make rational decisions. Maybe you need to be saying, I could have, If you were more 50-50 about it and not 10% feeling, 90% facts, that would help. Which is probably what you're trying to do, James. Right?
Maybe putting a number to
your
it.
Feelings more credit.
Putting numbers to it is a bit too clocky.
I like the word clocky. It's funny.
That's often the pit that I fall down as I'm strolling along. But no, absolutely right. I agree.
That's the other thing. I mean, the problem, the temptation with the clocks is you can explain it and you can't explain the clouds. That's why it's more digestible, the clocks, isn't it? Because you can say, here's the data, here's the facts. But there's a million ways to see the world, isn't there? More than you can fathom. And there's probably things that human nature hasn't discovered about itself, and
yeah, exactly.
Because you're so locked into looking at the world one way because of how you've survived, or how a human has survived evolutionarily, that there's probably something that's been missed. There's probably something out there so simple that's been missed because we are set in our ways, because we've had to survive.
You said to me,
no, I'm in the weeds anyway, man. So
no, this is great. No, I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate, because you said to me a week or two ago, or 3 weeks ago maybe, about Peterson's opinion of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And how this might tie in.
I've said this to you before, because Peterson talks about it a lot. It seems to me like his critique of Harris and the 4 horsemen is that they're trying to compare science to religion, which isn't what you should do, because it's not so much that they try and make out religion was old science. He's saying that's not what they were doing. They're thinking of the best way to describe the world. And back when these texts were written, whether it's Bible or any religious text, your psyche wasn't the same. You didn't analyze things in a scientific way like you do now. So they were more trying to tell stories about how to survive in the world, and a story is more of a template that fits in many more gaps than what science does. Science is square. You have to find it works for where it works, and it works very well. But religion, and I've said to you before, James, about if you were in a situation that someone had been in before, a really complex situation that someone had been in before, Harris is your man to listen to, because he's very analytical and he's he knows a lot. It's a lot of fact remembering. Whereas if you were in uncharted territory, you want to be listening to more Peterson, because his ideas about archetype and stories. I mean, this applies to, it's trying to talk to your feelings and how to navigate your feelings rather than know the exact thing to do. It's sort of what direction to go in and how to set up your moral compass. I hope that makes sense. And yeah, it does. Peterson talks loads about how I really like his about political preferences, and how conservatives, which were conservative leaning people, would be a lot more clock people, and that's good. He said if you just had the left running things, they can't focus hard. And this is chalking it up to simplicity. Obviously, there's a very grey area here. Like we said, you can't be. Everyone's a bit clock, a bit cloud. But if you had the conservatives only, they can do the same thing a lot very well and very efficiently, and be there on time and give someone a time that it can be done. And that's how the world works well, because they're reliable. And so if you left it all to the left, then it'd just sort of fall apart, because people would be getting distracted and everything. But however, you can't just leave it to the conservatives, because the world is an ever moving, changing thing. And you don't know what's going to come up. So a left-leaning, more creative mind will tackle those problems a lot more effectively than what a conservative person would, a right-leaning person would typically. Does that make sense? So you need the conservatives running it day to day. You need the left-leaning people kind of navigating it.
Yeah.
What's the best direction for it to go in and keeping it moving, and yeah.
I like that a lot. Rory Sutherland in this TED talk that I mentioned at the beginning said something similar. He said, if you're a creative type, so a cloudy in our paradigm, if you're working for a big business, you will have to run your idea by someone who is much more rational, a clocky, right? But the opposite is hardly ever true. So if you're somebody who's super rational in a business, it's very seldom that you have to ask somebody who is more creative and a bit more off the wall, oh, what do you think of this idea? So our society seems to value rational thought over creative, immeasurable experience. And I think there's a better balance to be had. Well, for every individual, before we start fixing society. Clean your room.
I think when Jordan Peterson's talking about it, he's talking about how that it's stupid that the left and the right don't tolerate each other, because they don't realise they need each other. You couldn't run it all left or run it all right. You need each other, and the pendulum swings in according to the world. So when it is time for a left government, the left government will come, and obviously it doesn't come in perfect timing, but it comes along when the world is 2 clocks, the left will get in. And then when the world is 2 clouds, the right will come in, and unfortunately it swings too fast sometimes before.
Yeah, that's the problem. The pendulum's getting further and further away from the middle.
Yeah, and he gives credit to the American and I suppose British system, where you kind of have 4 years to do what you do, and then the world decides whether you're headed in the right direction. And he gives credit to that system. He says it's very clever and very complex and well thought out, because otherwise you'd end up either running yourself into the ground or never getting anything done. You need it to swing both ways.
Swing both ways. That's a quote to end with. Den says you need to swing both ways. Thank you. Good night. Much love.
If you remember anything of this podcast, it's that sentence.
And just for the record, man, I do think on the marathon front, I could do with attention to the clocks early on. I've gone as far as I can with the clouds.
With the clouds. 2:44 is pretty far, brother.
No, I'm not going to. Yeah, it's good, but I'm not. I haven't done that in a long time, and I feel like even our last one, New York, when I went out, and I did have a watch, but I even ignored the clock, like literally straight up ignored the clock, and went with the clouds, and it didn't serve me well. So
brilliant.
I remember running out, and I think I did the first mile was about 5 minutes, and I thought, but I feel all right. But really, I should have been like 6 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
That's a beautiful.
So maybe if I'd have paid more attention to the clocks, I'd have ended up better overall. So yeah, it's definitely not.
See, there's always a balance.
You need to rub off each other.
That's it. That's kind of my goal for my 33rd year. Live with my whole body and not just my head.
All right.
Awesome, man.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for everybody who's watching this. Subscribe, share, and all the good stuff if you want. If not, hey, free choice. Ciao.
Cheers.
You clocky lot, you.